Today, we're very excited to welcome everyone back. It's been a little bit, so we're thrilled to be here. A few house rules that we have for virtual users groups. The goal of this is to be a Marketo-centric space where we can all feel comfortable discussing the challenges that we have, the problems that we run into, and some of our unique use cases. So we do ask that you not take any of that information from another person's use case and share that outside of the users group. We also ask that you not contact people outside of the group without their consent. And certainly, please don't share out the information of users that are present. We do, as I mentioned, prefer to keep this as a safe space for everyone. So we appreciate your support there. Now, for those of you who are new to this virtual platform, the users groups are now hosted on Bevy. It's an opportunity for us to better stay connected and access any information in the virtual world from users groups all around the world. With everything being remote, it's an opportunity to access content from, users groups locally to industry specific mugs, even pop into the European groups. So we encourage you, if you have not already, to sign up to be a part of Bevy. If there are groups that you'd like to follow, this one, for example, you can sign up to follow the content that's posted for each of those groups, or you can join one-time sessions there. Now, coming up, if you have not registered already, is the Adobe Summit that will be happening on April 27th and 28th. This is once again a free event for everyone. So it's 2 days of content. There are going to be sessions that are going to be played in the North American time zones, as well as European and Asian time zones. So wherever you are in the world, there'll be an opportunity for you to dial into the content that you are looking for. Check that out at summit.adobe.com. And sessions are now available for registration. In addition, the applications are now open for the Adobe Experience Makers Awards. This is an opportunity for you and your organization to really shine for the work that you've done with Adobe products over the last year. We encourage you to register on the Adobe site if you have not already, create a profile, and apply for an award that best suits the really awesome things that you and your group have done this year. And you can check that out at adobeexperienceawards.com. And finally, here's a look at some of those March virtual Marketo users groups meetings. We've got a group tomorrow in Minneapolis looking at the new UI. The New York users group regularly does a Q&A session with Sanford and Inga Romanoff. If you have not dialed into that, that's a great opportunity to pick up some fantastic tips. The Chicago and Tucson users groups are going to be doing some events around virtual events, tracking those, promoting those, something that's really been a big shift for organizations over the last year. So how to really maximize that. Seattle will be talking about some problem solving opportunities, and the Houston group is going to be going over everything you need to know about the new executable campaign type in Marketo. Now, before we kick off with today's session, we'd love to do a round of intros, especially since it's been a while since we've all been able to get together. We've definitely got some new faces. We've got some old friends here. So we'd love to go around and do a round of introductions. We'll go down the list in alphabetical order as it appears on the screen, but I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Brooke Bartos. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing Operations at Walker Sands. We're a digital agency in Chicago. I actually first joined the Microsoft Dynamics users group in 2014, late 2014, early 2015. So I've kind of been around for a while, but this group was what really started my journey with Marketo and Dynamics, and really helped me get my feet under me when I was at my previous organization. I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, my co-host, to go ahead and introduce herself.
Perfect. My name is Natalie Larkin. I work at a consultancy called Digital Pie. We mostly do marketing automation consulting, and I have been doing Marketo and Dynamics for around 8 to 9 years now. Perfect. I'm picking someone, Adam Edwards. Do you want to kick us off for the group introductions?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brooke and Natalie. Yeah, it's Adam Edwards here. I'm I work for a company called Blueprint X, based in the UK primarily. I'm personally based near Liverpool. You might know it for the football team, the Beatles, etc. Yeah, I've been working with Marketo for about 7 or 8 years now, and I do have a few Marketo and Dynamics integrations under my belt as a consultant. So yeah, that's I'll just stop it there. Pass it on to the next person. Nice to meet you all.
Wonderful, great to meet you. Let's jump over to Andrew.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Holstein. I work for a consulting company called Slalom. Been working in Marketo for about 6 or 7 years, and doing a lot of work these days with Dynamics and seeing Marketo putting a lot more effort into that connection. So very interested to see what other people are doing.
Brooke, Natalie, did you want to announce the next person to introduce themselves?
Yep, Ellie, do you want to go up next?
Oh, me? Hi, I'm Ellie Carey. I'm a marketing automation manager for Planet Home Lending, and we use Dynamics and really interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Perfect. How about Hunter?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hunter Strodel, and I'm an email marketing manager at the National Council for Behavioral Health. We're based in DC. I have been using Marketo for a little over 3 years. However, I just joined the nonprofit world in the past 6 or 7 weeks, I think. So I am brand new to Dynamics, and that is why I'm here.
Perfect. How about Helen?
Hi, I'm actually dialing in from Australia this morning. I am a marketing automation manager, and I came across this user group. Someone in a Slack group that I'm in shared it, and my business is actually on the path to implementing Dynamics. So I'm just kind of joining in to see what I can learn about, how well they work together.
Awesome. Michelle?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Delstro. I work at Genetech. So I'm newly promoted as the CRM marketing strategist. So I come more from the Dynamics side, but we've been trying to integrate Marketo into our CRM for a while now. So the more I can learn, the better.
Awesome. Mitchell?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mitchell Holbrook. I'm based in Auckland, New Zealand. I work for a company called Up Education, which is New Zealand's largest private education provider, and I'm a marketing automation specialist. I've been working with Dynamics for about 7 years, but only picked up Marketo in the last 1 year.
Awesome.
Great, happy to have you. And is it Matthias?
Yes, it's Matias. Hello, everybody. I'm based in Slovenia, actually, but I work for a Danish company called Consha. We operate across Europe, and I help run basically Marketo and Dynamics for all our offices. I'm really looking forward to hear what you have to say today.
Wonderful, welcome. Is it Ignis?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Ignis. I'm come from Belgium, and what I do, I'm working on a marketing system since 3 years ago, and I want to understand the synchronization between Microsoft Dynamics and Marketo, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Wonderful, welcome. I do see one that we missed a little bit earlier up at the top, Christopher Laver.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so yeah, I'm Chris. I'm dialing in from Australia as well. So I work for a agency called Social Garden, and I've been using Marketo for about 7 years. I've done a couple of Dynamics implementations, but I'm kind of trying to just see what other quirks there might be out there that I might not be aware of as well.
Wonderful. So excited to have you all here. All right.
It's good to be here.
Hey, this is Kayla. I didn't get to go, so I'll just introduce myself quickly. I work for C.H. Robinson. I manage our Marketo instance there, and we are just in the process of launching a Dynamics integration. So excited to learn more from the group today.
Wonderful. Great to have you. All right.
I'm Nicole. I didn't get to go either.
Oh, yep. We've still got the bottom half of the alphabet here.
Oh, I thought you were done. Okay.
That's
well,
okay.
I'll just go now.
Yeah, go right ahead.
My name is Nicole Marco. I work for AR in Pennsylvania. I used Marketo for a while at my previous company. Then we switched to Pardot. Now I'm back to using Marketo. I always have used Salesforce in the past, so I'm new to Dynamics. So that's why I'm here today.
Wonderful. I love all the excitement that you're all here for one very important reason. This is wonderful. All right, Marie-Celine, welcome. Marie-Celine? Nope. Yes, no? Yes? Nope. Okay, we can come back. All right, and Raymond.
There's the unmute button. Hi, I'm Ray. I work for the Washington, D.C. based nonprofit, the National Council for Behavioral Health. And I am based in North Carolina, not terribly far away from Washington, D.C. And I'm director of digital marketing. Been with Marketo for 2 or 3 years now, and Dynamics, I guess, about the same. And we figure it's about time that we start doing that a little bit better.
All right, excellent.
Anybody else? I think we got everyone. Awesome. Perfect. And kind of just to intro this, we obviously just revived the Dynamics mug and starting out. So we decided that the first topic that we wanted to choose is really a baseline to talk about, the integration and kind of the general information about the Marketo Dynamics connector to get us started. And then as we go through the months of this year, we're going to go into more niche topics and go into more complexities, but really wanted to level set, as I know a lot of people are just integrating or implementing for the first time. So with that, Kat, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Kat. I work for a consulting agency called Percuto, and I've been in the MarTech space for roughly 7 years now. I mainly take care of our customers in terms of customer satisfaction, CSM, project management, but I've done a few Dynamics implementations along the ways. And today I'm happy to share the things that I've learned that I wish I had known before some of the things I did. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. But we'll get started on what I'll call the Dcrm 101. So the dynamic basics, everything, or at least the most important things you need to know. I'm going to go through an overview and the integration capabilities. We're going to discuss a little bit how it works, the steps to use to integrate your project. Though I think we may have, and Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we might have nixed those slides to keep it time sensitive, but I'm also going to finish off with gotchas, tips and tricks, do's and don'ts. So how the Dcrm sync works. The first thing to know, it's very important to know that an instance of Marketo and an instance of Dcrm are synced for life. Once they're connected, you cannot switch your Marketo instance to point to a new instance of Dynamics. So if ever you're planning on switching your instance either from on-prem to online, or even upgrading the version of your current CRM, I would highly recommend that you wait until that DCRM upgrade is completed and then connect your Marketo instance. If there is a change that needs to happen after it's been connected, you will need to request a new Marketo instance. Once the records are synced between the two systems, Marketo maintains data consistency using what we call a periodic sync. It runs every 5 minutes after the last sync cycle has run. So the first connection, the initial sync, is done in real time. It will take anywhere between a few hours to quite a few hours. It really all depends on how much data you're bringing in. Once that's completed, you then move over to that periodic sync. The cycle itself will vary in length. It depends how much information is being transferred from one system to another. And once it's completed, Marketo will wait 5 minutes and reinitiate the cycle. Much like Salesforce, for those of you who are used to it, Marketo and Dynamics exchange data on the 4 main entities: the lead and contact, which updates the person data in Marketo, accounts, which update the company data, and opportunities and users update those fields in Marketo as well. Person data can be synced bidirectionally. Account opportunity and user data is synced one way from Dynamics to Marketo. So how does the sync work? Unlike Salesforce, you need to run people through a sync flow step in order to bring new Marketo records into Dynamics. Once that sync flow step is used and the person is synced in both systems, any updates on the records, and we'll get onto what can and cannot be updated a little bit later, any updates will then be carried on automatically through that sync cycle. Once the record is synced, like I mentioned, everything will be automatically carried over depending on your custom sync filter. That is one of the, if you ask my personal opinion, one of the best things about the dynamic sync is that it is extremely customizable and it doesn't require any help from your IT team. A lot of it can be managed in Marketo. And it's a really great way to really fine-tune the exchange of data between both systems so that both you and your marketing team and your sales team can have access to the same information, can cross-share information, and can best utilize that information. So I often get asked what the difference between Salesforce and Marketo, the Salesforce and Marketo sync versus the Microsoft Dynamics sync is. And the good news is that as of late, there isn't all that many differences. Many of the same triggers and flow steps are available. And it used to be that you could not change a record owner in Dynamics via Marketo, but they've released that feature as of January of last year. And you can basically run just about the same types of campaigns, flow steps, and triggers in a Dynamics synced Marketo instance as you can in a Salesforce synced instance. I also get asked a lot as well if there's a way to sync custom entities between Marketo and Dynamics. As most of you probably know, Dynamics is a highly customizable CRM, which is really great. And Marketo does support a certain level of entities and field synchronization. The most important thing to know is that one, they will be read-only fields. Marketo can see them, but they will not be able to update them. You can only bring in the custom entities once you've completed your initial sync, and those custom entities must be attached to either the lead, the contact, or the account entity in Dcrm. If your custom entity is attached to anything else, Marketo will not be able to see it. They can also only be 2 levels deep. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say we have our account entity, right? And under it, we decide to create a new custom entity called geography. And in there, we'll store a whole bunch of different details. That new geography entity is what we would call one level deep. It sits one row below account. Now, under that geography custom entity, you could also create a new entity called, let's say, verticals, and have a whole bunch of fields under that one too. That verticals entity is 2 levels deep. It reports into geography, which then reports into account. So it's a very similar to a parent-child relationship. You can only go as far as the grandchild and nothing below. So if you were to create another custom entity under that verticals custom entity, like a line of business, for example, Marketo won't be able to see those fields. Now, of course, once you have your custom fields in Marketo, you can use them in your filters and triggers, and you can also use them in email script tokens. One of the nice things about the Dcrm sync, in my opinion, is the level of granularity that you get, as I mentioned, and the control that you can have over the sync. So the permissions, the field and object system permissions are defined by the profile, and it is tied to a sync user, much like I believe Salesforce is. And then, of course, the Marketo's permissions can be fine-tuned, just like any other CRM. Now, what's amazing and what's different with Salesforce is this particular field access granularity. You, in your Marketo admin section, you can see all of the fields that Marketo has visibility on, which will depend on how you set up your sync filter. And then you can see exactly how many of those fields are synced for each entity. So for the lead, the contact, the account, the opportunity, you can select one by one the fields that you want to connect and that you want to sync between Marketo and Dynamics. It's extremely flexible. And all of those are synced based on schema. So there's a really easy way to make sure that you don't mistakenly sync the wrong fields. Sometimes our labels are very similar in naming, but Marketo has visibility on the field schema, which is a unique name. It makes it very easy to tie in together. Leads and contacts are mapped 2 to 1 because they refer to the person fields in Marketo, as I mentioned earlier. Once you've selected each field one by one to bring in, you can get even more granular as to how those fields can be updated. For each field, you can block updates depending on how the information came in to Marketo. So for example, you could have, Marketo could have the ability to update a person's last name if they did a form fill out, but we would block the update if they came in through a list import. So with a combination of your sync filter, the fields you've decided to sync over, and the field blocking, you can basically have either no access at all to a field, a read-only access, a partial write access, or a complete write access. And it's extremely, extremely granular. And like I said, this is potentially one of my favorite things about the Microsoft Dynamics sync. All right, the anatomy of a sync cycle. So a little bit different than Salesforce. Marketo will check for new and updated records based on the system mod stamp, and it will pull the changes into Marketo. Updates to Marketo records will then be pushed down to Microsoft Dynamics. So it always goes from Dcrm up to Marketo first, and then back around to from Marketo to Dynamics second. Now, as you can imagine, that could potentially cause some what we call race conditions. If a Marketo record was updated and it's waiting to be pushed down to Dynamics, that same record was updated in Dynamics and it's waiting to be pushed up to Marketo, it's very important to know that Marketo will win on a lead record. So whatever update was made on both sides, the Marketo update is the one that will stick for leads. However, the Dcrm will win on contact records. So again, if both records were updated, the person was updated in Marketo, the contact was updated in Dcrm, Dcrm will win on the contact. If the lead is updated in Dcrm and the person is updated in Marketo, Marketo will win on the lead. I should point out that this rarely happens. It's very, very rare, but it could cause some confusion if you're trying to figure out why this didn't get changed or why this didn't get updated. This would be the reason. All right, now for the infamous gotchas. First, duplicate records. We can't really get around talking about this. It's important to note, however, that duplicates can happen for a number of reasons, and this is not dynamic specific, right? Duplicates can happen no matter what system you connect to, and even in an unconnected Marketo instance, they could happen. There's just a few subtleties to be aware of when it comes to dynamics. Just like the integration, Marketo, just like any integration, Marketo assigns a unique ID to each record, and that person record will keep its ID even when the lead is qualified in Dynamics. That's why the entities lead and contact are a 2-to-1 mapping in the schema. Now, the tricky part is that Marketo looks at the Dcrm GUID, the globally unique identifier, and not the email address. And I think this is one of the most common misconception. And I believe it's also true for Salesforce, that Marketo looks for the Salesforce ID and not the email. So a lot of questions I get when people are running into duplicates, they'll say, well, I thought Marketo and Dynamics would understand this is the same email address. It should have deduped. Marketo does actually not dedupe on email address. It only does that when you upload lists. It will dedupe on ID when it's synced. So the important thing to keep in mind is to ensure that you leverage the out-of-the-box conversion process in Dynamics. Marketo and the Dynamics sync was built to look for those specific triggers and actions, and it understands them properly. So once you qualify your lead in Dynamics, it creates an account and a contact record, and it knows to tie the Marketo ID to those records. And Marketo now understands it's no longer looking at a lead, but rather at a contact. If you were to use a custom process to convert your leads in Dynamics, it could cause Marketo to lose sight of the GUID, which will then introduce multiple records with the same email. But the good news is there are a lot of great tools that can help merge and prevent duplicates that are dynamic friendly, that are integrated with Marketo. Your Dcrm admin can also set up parameters in Dynamics to prevent duplicates from being created. And of course, just like any other system, it goes without saying that the best practice is to validate first if a record exists with the email address. And if it doesn't, then create it. But of course, if it does exist, you would want them to own that record and work off of that record as to avoid the duplicates. Now, I know that some companies work off duplicates, and there are definitely use cases for which that makes sense. It is my personal opinion that if you can avoid it, I believe you should. That being said, if you can't, or if you positively want to work off of duplicates because of your business model, I would encourage you to design your end-to-end process on paper first and run through scenarios, those infamous if then that scenarios. That way, you'll be able to identify any possible gap or issue before you create records. It's a lot easier to fix a process on paper than it is to fix data that's been created in a way that we don't necessarily want it to. All right, my second gotcha is to keep in mind that the native Dynamics connector has a limited capacity. Now, don't worry, it's quite large, but it does have one, and we need to keep that in mind. It acts a lot like a highway, right? So during peak rush hour, you might get a bit of a traffic jam, but the good news is that it can be easily prevented by one, minimizing the amount of fields that you sync. There are going to be a potential high number of fields that Marketo has visibility on, but you should really ask yourself as you're going through the exercise of do we sync it or not, is this field a must-have? Will it help us better work on our marketing initiative? Or is it a nice to have, but chances are we probably won't use it? And is it a, oh, well, it's there, why not just bring it in, right? So I would avoid let's just bring it in and stick to the must-haves and potentially throw in a few nice-to-haves. You can also refrain from performing updates on large number of records during peak business hours, right? As people are logging into your Marketo, things are happening, campaigns are firing, you probably want to keep your large updates for outside business hours to minimize the potential impacts and cause a backlog. Good news is Marketo will treat all of the updates that you're sending. It's just going to treat them in sequence. And if you have a very, very, very large number of updates that are pending to be processed and somebody fills out a form on your website, that form fill out doesn't skip the queue. It gets stuck to the back and it will wait its turn. And therefore, you could potentially prevent somebody from getting a real-time notification. You want to avoid mass updates when possible. If you have to update a bulk number of your records, again, try to do that outside of business hours if possible, or do them in smaller batches. Run your updates on a percentage of all of your records, then run them on the second batch, then run them on the third batch. That way it'll be easier on your connector. Of course, last but not least, it goes both ways, right? Marketo to Dcrm and vice versa. If you need to do those updates in Dynamics, make sure to also do them outside of peak hours because that information does come flowing through up to Marketo. And I would definitely encourage that you make your Dynamics admin and your Marketo admin BFFs and make sure that they chat very often. They both need to be aware when changes are going up or down the pipe and plan accordingly and together. Oh, I think I might have skipped one slide by mistake. No, okay. One more thing to note, Marketo custom fields do not sync to CRM. So if you have all of these things that you want to put together, they would require a custom field to capture certain pieces of information. Before you create your custom field in Marketo, always ask yourself, is this going to be valuable to the sales team? Will they want that information? And if the answer is yes, create the field in Dynamics first. Once it's created in Dynamics, Marketo will have visibility on it and you can tie it to your record or to your person, to your account or to your opportunity. But do make sure that you create it in Dynamics first. Otherwise, you will end up with duplicate fields. And finally, my last gotcha for you guys to keep in mind is about the sync person flow step. As I mentioned earlier, you do have to run a person through the sync flow step in order to move them over to Dynamics. I would encourage you to centralize that into a global campaign and not as a flow step in individual campaigns. That way, if you need to investigate an issue, you'll know exactly where to go as opposed to have to audit multiple campaigns, which could unfortunately turn into a bit of a needle in a haystack type of situation. So definitely keeping things centralized makes it a lot easier for somebody to update the campaigns if need be, and then of course troubleshoot. And should you relegate your instance to somebody on your team, they will also be able to quickly find what they're looking for. And I think that's pretty much it when it comes to the Dynamics Sync 101. Do you guys have any questions?
Hi, Kat. This is Kayla Greenwood with CH Robinson. We have a Marketo admin that's going to be starting at our org at the end of the month, and I would love to share this deck with him because Dynamics is new to him. So he comes from a Marketo Salesforce background. So I was wondering if it would be possible to share the deck out.
Yes, I believe Natalie or Brooke can send that deck to you guys.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a question about merging contacts in Dynamics, since you can't do it in Marketo. Can you bulk merge in Dynamics?
I will I believe you can. However, I'm
can.
not well versed in all of the versions of Dynamics. Oh, wait, somebody chimed in. What did you say?
I was just saying under advanced settings, there's a duplicate detection jobs. I'm not particularly familiar with it myself, but I believe you can set up some rules to bulk merge people, or at least bulk identify them and manually merge them. My instance needs a lot of cleaning up in that area as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is Ellie. Hi. Great presentation. I think it was really helpful and really great background. I've been the last 3-4 months trying to implement a Marketo Dynamics instance. And I think that, you know, I know this is a good starting point, but talking about, you know, when you need to move outside of a native integration, I know the big thing that project issues that we've run into is custom objects is a huge thing. So just throwing that out there, I know that's definitely a big thing for a lot of dynamic users where they have custom objects that require a lot of custom work.
Good point. Thank you. One thing I just thought of that I mistakenly forgot to put in this presentation, and I can put it after the last gotcha. Lookup tables. There are the structure of the database of Microsoft Dynamics allows for a lookup table, meaning the data that references the field is actually stored on a completely separate table, and that field is doing, I guess, we could call it the equivalent of like a VLOOKUP and pulling the data back in. In Microsoft Dynamics, you will see the label. So for example, if your country field is a lookup field, the country values are stored in a completely separate table and are tied to GUIDs, to those globally unique identifiers. In Dynamics, you'll see the value of Canada or United States or Brazil. The reality is the value that's actually in the table itself is that 16-digit GUID. Marketo does not translate and does not look up. So if you tie a field that is a lookup field in your sync, right? Earlier, I showed you how you can select your fields, which ones you want to bring in, and you decide to select that country field. Marketo will display the value as it finds it, which is GUID, which is the 16-digit. It is not very user-friendly. You will not guess what the country is, right? There are codes that are meant to be looked up in the database. Very easy and quick workaround is to create a field where you will store the label value and connect that field instead of the original lookup field. Just a quick gotcha says, I've been surprised in the past at some values I saw coming through and I could not understand what was happening.
Yeah,
I have a
that's a really
question. Yeah,
good-
that's
yeah.
that's a problem that we ran into. That was part of why we had to move off of the native integration, because our Dynamics team, they didn't want to copy into another field because it's a workflow they just didn't want to do. But I did hear from Marketo when we were talking to them that it is on their roadmap to fix, I think within this year, which is a positive. I know I heard that.
That's great news. And I think somebody else wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I have that problem right now with our business unit field. So you would create another field for the label in Dynamics or in Marketo, or both?
In Dynamics, so that you could store the label value as opposed to store the GUID. That way Marketo can read the words instead of reading the 16-digit code.
Yes. Okay.
We have that issue a lot in our instance as well. So we've created quite a few fields, which I just call the plain text fields. As you guys have described, one other gotcha with this is just ensure that if your CRM, if your Dynamics admin creates this field, they'll set up a workflow to copy across the value as plain text, but make sure that they go back and run that workflow on all existing data. Because I had campaigns running, looking at the value of that field that for 90% of our data was blank, which didn't go down very well.
That's a very good point. Backfilling the data is very important.
I had a question regarding custom conversions. I guess so as you mentioned, Marketo is the Marketo connector works well with the standard conversion. But I found with quite a lot of Dynamics instance that they often already have a requirement to not use the standard conversion. So then they use a custom conversion, which then basically marks the original record in Marketo as Microsoft is deleted as true, and then creates a duplicate record for the contact record. I was just wondering, does anyone have any better ways of managing how they handle that situation? Because at the moment, what we do is we basically just delete the original record for Marketo, which then means we lose all of that attribution and history. I'm just wondering if there's a way that they can be automatically merged in Marketo, in Dynamics, or if anyone's got any better solutions for what they do with handling custom conversions.
This is Natalie. Yeah, I've talked to Marketo and engineering about that a lot, and what they have to work with is they have to align with and build towards the out-of-the-box functionality for Dynamics. And because that convert to opportunity is the out-of-the-box functionality that they build towards, there really isn't a workaround, because what happens there is when that out-of-the-box conversion happens, it writes a specific log to Marketo that says, hey, this lead has been converted to a contact. And so without that out-of-the-box activity happening, it's not writing that log to change it. Sometimes I see clients, do their custom process if they need to. And then one thing that Marketo can do down the road is clear out the GUID on the back end for those leads so that you are able to merge them in Marketo. So if you right now have a set of, let's say, 5K leads that are technically quote unquote converted in your system, but they are really just deactivated and a new contact was created, engineering can help you remove the GUID on the back end for those so that you can merge those leads into those contacts on the Marketo side.
Oh, cool. All right. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting prospect. Maybe I'll have a further look into that then with Marketo engineering. Thanks for that tip.
Great conversation. Anyone have anything else? Any experiences recently? I know some of you are implementing or working through implementing.
I have a question, and I apologize if we went over this. I had to step away for about 10 minutes. But we are looking into implementing or syncing over campaign data. Is that, I know that there was that wasn't available, but that is now, correct?
So what's currently available is, yes, you can sync campaign data over once your initial sync has been completed. I believe, Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong, that was added in January of last year, I believe.
So is the functionality similar to that when in Salesforce, where you kind of create the campaign in the CRM and then it'll sync over and you can add people through the flow steps?
It's a bit different in the sense that Dynamics doesn't have the concept of campaign membership. So what it actually integrates with are marketing lists.
Okay.
And it will let you create one marketing list per campaign, per lead and contact, right? Because if you've ever worked with marketing lists in Dynamics, you have to create it by entity. So it will actually sync those records into those marketing lists that are associated with the campaigns.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, and we definitely have that on our list to kind of review the new campaign integration and show you what it looks like.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
I had an experience that I wanted to share with the group, if we've got about a minute. I had this infuriating issue where one of my fields would simply not sync over from CRM into Marketo, and I had campaigns that really relied on that field coming through with data as soon as the record was created. And I ended up speaking with Marketo support. I think we went back and forth for about 2 weeks on this, and I had all sorts of other people trying to help me. Does anyone want to take a stab at what was causing this one field to not come through?
Is it your custom sync filter?
It wasn't that, and that was certainly one of the first things that we looked at. The custom sync filter, luckily for us, is fairly straightforward. What it actually was is my Dynamics admin had noticed that the Marketo sync user had permission to delete most record types, and so they removed that permission. Now, Marketo, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually does not delete records in Dynamics, or I think it's not easy for it to delete records in Dynamics. However, it needs that delete permission for other reasons. And if you remove it, basic syncing will fail in some instances. And that was what was happening to us. So when we restored the sync user permissions to the default ones, everything started working again. And I was really annoyed that it took so long for us to identify that that was the problem. But yeah, don't touch the permissions on your sync user is the advice I would give.
Love it.
Good tip.
I have a quick question if everybody else is finished. Nice tip, by the way, Mitchell. Thanks for that. I've noted that one. Yeah, so I was just wondering if anybody, this is more on the dynamic side, but does anybody know if it's possible to limit Marketo sales insight visibility to certain Dynamics users based on a profile? Anyone done that before? Or any Dynamics admins want to chime in on that one? Maybe take a stab at it. Has anyone had that request before? It was one thing I was asked recently, and I was it's one of those things I'm going to have to, I guess, check in the sandbox to see if I can reproduce it.
I'm not sure I fully understand your question. What do you mean by, do you want to limit the number of people who have access to MSI, or you want to limit what information is accessible within MSI to those who have access to it?
Yeah, Cat, so it's the former. So it's limit the people that can access it.
MSI is by seats, if I'm not mistaken. So you should be able to limit the seat users.
Yeah, I'm guessing using a Dynamics profile of some sort. But I just, I guess I haven't got around to actually trying it yet. So I was just wondering if anybody had. But yeah, so I think we'll put that as a tentative yes for now. And I'll, if I do get the chance to test it in Sandbox, I'll update you guys on the progress on that.
Yeah, I do know that it has its own permission, but would depend on how you have all your permissions set up.
Okay.
For sharing those.
Cool. No, thank
My
you.
understanding is that the user records on Dynamics and the Marketo users, even if they are synced, their roles don't have to be. So you can give anyone any role on Marketo you like, which will either have access to that or not, regardless of what they have in Dynamics. At least that's how it's run on my instance.
Yeah, that's correct. They're not synced. Actually, I guess that's another question about SSO and maybe a future feature request that I guess permissions could be synced. I did have another question actually about the Marketo connector. A question I had recently from a client was, and I'd never actually looked under the hood to see if it does this, but whenever I've integrated previous instances, but the question was whether the Marketo connector, when you install it in Dynamics, does it change any existing standard entities? For example, they referenced, I think there was a Click Dimensions app that they'd previously installed, changed the account entity name back to account. So is anybody aware of the Marketo connector actually changing any native functionality or entities, or does it only add or update them? Oh, sorry, only add new entities or I guess update by adding custom fields, etc.
We have had the case in our CRM last summer. So what was going on? We had changed one of the standard ways of working for the accounts, and Marketo, as we reset it the standard way when we have installed the connectors. Without that we noticed that, and that has caused an issue to us. So we have had to reverse the stuff. So you have to be careful of the connections between the standard entities within Microsoft when you are starting the connectors.
Okay, so what was that exact scenario, Mary?
The exact. So when we have installed what we had to change one of the way the parenting was going on from the account to another field, another entities into CRM. I don't remember which one. And when we installed the connectors, he has reset all the parenting. The standard way in CRM, but we had modified it, and so it has restored it to the normal ways of working, and it has made a huge problem to us. It was into the I remember it was into the way we are defining the users which are responsible of the accounts. And so sorry, I'm not English, so I'm losing a little my word. So we had it has modified. We can restore it without any problem afterwards. But you need to be careful about that. It can, when you are installing the connectors, it can modify the parenting back to normal. And if you had modified it before into CRM, you have to restore the parenting that you had modified.
Got it. Okay, now that's great information. Thank you very much, Marie-Céline. That pretty much answers my question, and that it's good to know that that's possible. So the Marketo connector will actually try to reset the schema, or the relationships of some sort back to the default. That was your experience. That's great, because it just means that we just need to be aware of that, and then the order of operations needs to be, okay, if we've got any custom relationships that we've set up, or I mean, I don't know the extent of what it changes, honestly. The fact that it changes one thing means we need to be careful, and we need to make sure that people are aware that we'll need to set this again after the connector's been installed. Great information. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
One thing, and I don't know if this is kind of the similar vein, but we got told once we turned on the native integration that the opportunity object is completely locked. So if there was some extra API custom work we wanted to do, we couldn't actually do it with the API and the opportunity object, just so you know.
Thank you, Ellie. Yeah, I'll note that as well.
I mean, what kind of updates would you want to, I guess, make to it before locking it? What kind of updates are there that you can make that there may be reason to?
Yeah, I think part of it, part of our problem was the lookup field. That was one main issue. And I know, like, obviously the workaround is just copying and pasting the lookup into another field and in Dynamics, but like I said, our workflows are pretty limited from the CRM team, so that was a solution that we were trying to solve for. I'm trying to think, there were additional ones. We did have multiple borrowers associated to one opportunity. We're in finance, so it's really common to have multiple people tied to one opportunity, And I think that was another problem that we ran into, that we needed to do some custom API work to link the two. And that was part of it.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, once you've configured your native connector, it's actually both the opportunity and the account entity that can be blocked from being updated from a third party. It's actually not uncommon to use a combination of both native connector and a third party, whether you use something like Scribe or Boomi or MuleSoft to update certain things that the Marketo connector can't do. But it does lock your opportunity in your account entity. So the third party will only be able to update lead and contact. So the person, lead contact, and then custom entities and fields.
One other quick question, actually, I've just thought of. I have asked Marketo to support this question, but in the documentation it says the sync filter has to start with new _ sync to MKTO, the schema name of the field that is. Has anybody asked Marketo support in the past to remap that, or to use a separate field? Maybe your dynamic system uses a different prefix. Has anyone got any experience with that? I seem to remember doing it on a previous project, but I could be confusing it with something else.
I can tell you from experience, if it is not written exactly how it is said in the documentation, it will not work.
Okay.
It must be synced to MKTO specifically.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kat.
I would maybe have one question regarding one actually error that we are getting in the Dynamics CRM. When you install a plugin, in the settings you get these extensions about Marketo, I think config, error log, API config, and another one. At some point, it just started to appear some errors, and we cannot open these extensions. They don't impact any functionality, so the integration works as it should. Everything is okay. We try to resolve that with support. We couldn't move anywhere, so it's still there. As I said, because it doesn't impact the functionalities, we kind of left it. But still, if somebody maybe experienced that as well, and if you managed to fix it.
Yeah, actually, if you're talking about the error config log within Dynamics itself, Matjash, I think, I believe I remember seeing in the documentation somewhere that errors are actually quite normal in that particular area. I guess it's more of an issue if it appears in the error log within Marketo, and you're seeing clearly, defined error codes that are suggesting that a sync hasn't occurred. But in terms of the error log in Dynamics, I can try and find the documentation where it says this, but I'm pretty sure they're not as serious, and it's to be expected to have some in there for some reason. I don't know. But I'll try and dig that out for you.
The logs are located under settings and under extensions.
Yeah.
You should see two different files, Marketo log and Marketo error log.
Yeah.
And those, I can tell you also from experience, if ever you want to open a ticket with Marketo support, the first thing they will ask you is to provide Marketo logs and Marketo error logs. So you might want to get ahead of them in opening your ticket and already providing those logs for them, as they do need them to troubleshoot some of the issues that are happening or could potentially happen.
Yeah, I mean, the trick we have that these things don't work. You cannot open them. It throws an error in Dynamics saying there is some data error or something, and we simply cannot open them. And I don't know why. It just appeared at some point. I couldn't figure it out why exactly. But as I said, it doesn't impact any processes, so we are kind of leaving it for now.
Very interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, I don't see that one very commonly either.
Yeah, I mean, I also asked in some Slack groups, but also I couldn't get any answer. Also, the support actually didn't really know what to do. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Great conversation, guys. And I've written down a lot of topics for the future, and also some things to put together for some mugs on tips, tips and tricks. So I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Kat, so much for presenting today and covering these key topics.
Of course, my pleasure.
And we're going to keep this rolling, and we're planning on having our next session in April around the 13th or 14th. So everyone keep on the lookout for the next mug coming up.
Have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Bye.
Cheers.